Larry Daly had been gone from the museum for years. He told himself he wouldn't come back, that he had outgrown the madness of living wax figures and ancient magic. But there he was, standing in the marble foyer of the Museum of Natural History, staring at the familiar shadows stretching unnaturally long across the floor. The air inside felt heavy, stale, almost funereal. He inhaled deeply, expecting the scent of polish and old stone, but instead he caught something metallic, like rust, or dried blood. Just one more job, Larry muttered to himself. One night. They need me to supervise the delivery, that's it. The museum had changed since he last worked there. The lighting seemed dimmer, as if the bulbs were tired of fighting off the dark. The silence wasn't peaceful, it was the suffocating kind of quiet that comes before a scream. Even the statues appeared different, harsher somehow, their glass eyes glinting with something almost predatory. At exactly midnight, the delivery arrived. A crew of movers wheeled in a colossal wooden crate, taller than a man and sealed with iron bands. Its surface was scarred, almost clawed, as though something inside had tried to get out. Faded hieroglyphs ran along the edges, their lines sharp and jagged, like cuts made into flesh. Larry frowned. What is this? I thought it was supposed to be a new exhibit from Egypt, something harmless. One of the movers gave a nervous laugh. Harmless? Yeah, sure. They said it was a sarcophagus, but, he lowered his voice. You hear it? Larry froze. Beneath the sound of the squeaking dolly wheels was something else. A faint scratching. A steady, deliberate scrape, as though fingernails dragged across the inside of the crate. The mover shook his head and forced a grin. Never mind. I'm just tired. But Larry had heard it. He knew he had. They left the crate in the central hall, beneath the looming dinosaur skeletons. Its presence seemed to warp the air itself, as though the walls bent inward, leaning closer, listening. Once the movers left, Larry was alone. Completely alone. The museum after dark was supposed to be chaotic, full of laughter and chatter as figures from every era sprang to life. But tonight, nothing stirred. The silence thickened. The exhibit stood still, too still, as if holding their breath. Teddy Roosevelt's wax face seemed tighter, his mustache sharper. Sacagawea's eyes caught the faintest glimmer of light, too wet, too real. Larry rubbed his arms. It's just in my head. It's just the night. Just nerves. The scratching began again. Soft. Slow. Relentless. His gaze snapped to the crate. The sound was louder now, coming in bursts, like frantic clawing. Something inside was desperate, furious. Larry's instincts screamed at him to leave. To run. To get out while he could. But he was frozen, feet cemented to the floor. The museum clock chimed once. Midnight. A whisper slid through the air, so faint he wasn't sure if it was in the room or inside his skull. Let me out. Larry stumbled backward, his heart pounding against his ribs. Nope. Not tonight. Not dealing with this. He turned toward the exit, but the doors had shut themselves, sealing with a heavy metallic groan. The whisper came again, more insistent. Let me out. He looked back. The crate shook violently, the iron bands rattling as though stretched by invisible hands. A crack split down the middle, releasing a gust of air so cold it burned his skin. Shadows spilled out, not natural shadows, but thick, writhing things that slithered across the marble like living tar. They reached toward him, stretching long, too long, fingers forming at their ends. Larry grabbed a flashlight from the security desk, his hands trembling. The beam cut through the dark, illuminating the crate. And for the briefest moment, he saw something inside. A face. It wasn't a pharaoh's mask, nor a mummified corpse. It was a face twisted in agony, eyes sewn shut, mouth frozen wide in a scream that never ended. The lips were shredded as though it had screamed for centuries. The skin was dry, gray, and flaking, yet still alive, pulsing faintly. Larry's throat closed. He staggered backward, nearly tripping over the dinosaur display. The scratching stopped. The face vanished. But the whisper lingered. "You woke me. Now you can't leave." The entire museum seemed to breathe then, walls groaning, glass cases trembling. Far off, something roared, a sound too primal, too guttural to belong to any wax exhibit. Larry realized the truth with a clarity that chilled him to the marrow. The magic hadn't returned to bring history to life. It had returned to bring the dead back. And this time, it wasn't playful. It was hungry. The silence after the roar was unbearable. It pressed down on Larry's chest, smothering him. He stood frozen, gripping the flashlight so tightly his knuckles turned white. The beam flickered, as if the very air was choking the light. He tried to tell himself it was just another night at the museum. That at any moment, Teddy Roosevelt would laugh his hearty laugh, or Attila the Hun would burst through a door swinging his club. But deep down, he knew, this was different. This wasn't magic, it was something older, darker, and far more dangerous. The crate still loomed in the center of the hall, cracked and breathing faint tendrils of shadow. Larry couldn't look at it for long without feeling dizzy, as though the box swallowed his thoughts. Then he heard it. Not scratching this time, but whispering. Hundreds of voices, layered together, some in languages he didn't know, some in screams that weren't words at all. They seeped from the walls, from the floor, from the mouths of the statues around him. He turned the flashlight toward Roosevelt's wax figure. The familiar smile was gone. The wax had shifted, stretched, warped. The mouth hung open, lips dry and cracked, and the whisper came from inside, spilling out like smoke. Larry stumbled back. No, this isn't happening. The light swung wildly to Sacagawea. Her eyes were moving now, rolling, frantic, as though she were trapped inside her own wax prison, begging him with her gaze. Her lips trembled, but instead of words, a deep gurgle seeped out, like drowning lungs trying to scream. The whispers grew louder, and Larry realized they were all around him. Every figure. Every exhibit. Every piece of history was whispering at once, their voices merging into one unbearable chorus. We remember. The flashlight flickered. For a split second, the hall went dark. When the light returned, the figures were gone. Every wax figure, every mannequin, every frozen face had vanished from their displays. The glass cases were empty, the stands bare. Larry's breath hitched. Where are they? A reflection caught his eye. On the polished marble floor, stretching in the pale light, were faces. Not shadows. Faces. Dozens, hundreds, flattened against the ground, their features screaming upward as if pressed beneath glass. Eyes rolled in sockets, mouths opened in silent agony, teeth scraping against the floor as they tried to bite through. Larry staggered back, his boot heel brushing one of the faces. Its lips split into a grin that stretched far too wide, tearing the skin. A tongue slithered out and licked across the floor toward his shoe. Jesus Christ! He yanked his foot back, his pulse thundering. The museum lights sputtered again, and the faces melted away. Silence. Only the crate remained. Larry's chest heaved. He wanted to run, but his body betrayed him, pulling him closer to the thing. His feet moved on their own, each step heavier than the last. The crack in the wood had widened, the iron bands snapping one by one with hollow twangs. Cold air bled out, carrying the stench of rot, old stone, and something sickly sweet, like spoiled honey. Then came the sound. A child's laugh. High-pitched. Innocent. Completely wrong. It echoed down the corridor, bouncing off the walls, making it impossible to tell where it came from. Larry froze mid-step. His flashlight shook in his trembling hands, the beam jittering across the exhibits. Another laugh answered. This one lower, distorted. Then another. And another. Soon the museum was filled with the laughter of unseen children, overlapping, echoing, building into something hideous. "Stop," Larry whispered. His voice cracked. "Please, just stop." The laughter cut off instantly. Dead silence. Then a voice, so close it felt like it was breathing into his ear, opened the box. Larry spun, swinging the flashlight, but no one was there. The beam only revealed endless corridors, their shadows twitching unnaturally, like living things. The crate groaned. A hand, gray, thin, fingers like roots, pushed through the crack, splintering the wood. The nails were long, curling, digging into the marble as if testing the world outside. Larry dropped the flashlight. It rolled across the floor, the beam spinning until it stopped, aimed squarely at the crate. Another hand pushed through. Then a third. Too many. Far too many. He scrambled back, heart hammering, but the doors to the hall slammed shut on their own, locking him in with the thing. The wood of the crate burst outward, shards raining across the room. A smell of centuries-old decay poured out. Something began to crawl free. Not one body. Not one creature. A mass. A shifting, writhing tangle of limbs, faces, torsos, all melted together, all screaming in unison. Eyes blinked open across its surface, mouths chewed at the air, teeth grinding, tongues flicking. Some faces begged for help. Others grinned with jagged hunger. Larry's scream caught in his throat. The mass slithered forward, dragging itself with dozens of mismatched arms. The marble cracked beneath its weight. And then it spoke. Not with one voice, but with all of them, every figure, every whisper, every face at once. "We are history. And you belong to us." Larry's lungs burned as though the air itself had turned against him. The mass of bodies, eyes, and mouth slithered closer, its voices rattling inside his skull. He stumbled backward, slipping on the slick marble, his palms scraping against the cold stone. "This isn't real," he told himself. "It's the magic again. Just the magic." But deep down, he knew. This wasn't the playful spell that once brought wax figures to life for a night of antics. This was something raw, older than language. This was history itself unchained, vengeful, starving. The mass lurched forward. Dozens of faces peeled open their mouths, releasing a moan so deep the floor vibrated beneath him. Larry scrambled to his feet and ran. His footsteps echoed in the cavernous hall, but the sound of the thing dragging behind him was louder, wet, cracking, relentless. He ducked into the Egyptian wing. His breath came in ragged bursts, chest tight with panic. The flashlight beam jittered over rows of ancient artifacts, jars, statues, tablets. Their shadows warped and bent, stretching long fingers that reached toward him as he passed. A glass case rattled violently. He turned just in time to see a mummified hand slam against the glass from the inside. Then another. The linen-wrapped corpses were moving, straining against their enclosures, their jaws working as muffled groans seeped through the cloth. "God, no," Larry whispered. The first case shattered. The mummy collapsed onto the floor in a heap of brittle bones and wrinkled flesh. It twitched, then rose, its jaw unhinging wider than it should have been able to, releasing a scream like tearing metal. Larry grabbed a fire extinguisher from the wall and swung it with everything he had. The metal crushed through the mummy's skull, splintering bone, but instead of collapsing, the body convulsed and released a swarm of black beetles from the wound. They poured across the floor, skittering toward him in a living tide. Larry bolted down the corridor. His shoes slapped against the stone, squashing beetles underfoot, their shells popping like knuckles. Behind him, the sound of glass cases shattering filled the air. More mummies spilled free, some crawling on all fours, others dragging themselves by their arms, jaws clacking like teeth grinding in anticipation. He ran until the corridor opened into the Hall of Civilizations. He skidded to a stop. The exhibits were alive. Medieval knights stood in their armor, visors dripping black liquid that hissed as it hit the floor. Their swords trembled in their hands, scraping against the marble, hungry for blood. A Viking figure grinned, his wax face peeling to reveal raw muscle beneath. His axe split the display rope like paper. Larry's breath hitched. They weren't frozen in character anymore. They weren't reenacting history. They were rewriting it. The knights moved toward him. The Viking roared, a sound that rattled the chandeliers overhead. Larry turned and ran back the way he came, but the Egyptian mummies were already pouring into the hall, their wrappings unraveling, trailing like the tongues of starving dogs. Trapped. He dove into a stairwell, slamming the door behind him. His chest heaved as he pressed his weight against it, listening to fists and claws batter the other side. The metal vibrated under their blows. Larry forced himself up the stairs 2 at a time, lungs screaming, legs weak. He emerged into the dim planetarium. The dome above stretched into an endless black sky, constellations faintly glowing. For a moment, he allowed himself to breathe. But then he realized, the stars were wrong. They twisted, shifted, rearranged themselves into patterns no astronomer had ever recorded. The constellations pulsed like beating hearts. One star flared red, dripping light down the dome like blood. Larry backed away, but the floor beneath him rippled like water. He stumbled, falling to his knees. Reflections bloomed across the surface, his own face staring back at him. But not just one. Dozens. Hundreds. Each reflection warped, twisted, his eyes gouged out, his mouth sewn shut, his flesh peeled back. Every possible version of his own death gazed back at him, grinning with mockery. No, 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 no. He slammed his fists against the floor, but the reflections only smiled wider, their mouths opening in unison to whisper his name. Larry. The whisper filled the dome, multiplying until it roared like an ocean. He clamped his hands over his ears, but the sound vibrated in his bones. Then, the reflections began to climb out. Hands broke the surface of the floor, fingers gripping the air like invisible ladders. One by one, distorted versions of himself pulled free, skinless, eyeless, twisted shadows of his body, crawling toward him on all fours. The door at the far end of the planetarium burst open. The writhing mass from the crate slithered inside, filling the space, its chorus of faces shrieking. Larry was surrounded, by himself, by the dead, by history's hunger. And for the first time, he realized something he hadn't dared consider. This wasn't about saving the museum anymore. It was about surviving long enough to see daylight. If daylight would ever come. Larry staggered backward as the distorted versions of himself crawled toward him, their jaws snapping open and shut like broken hinges. The flashlight beam flickered wildly across their warped faces. He wanted to scream, but no sound came out, his voice was trapped inside his chest, strangled by terror. The mass from the crate writhed at the doorway, too large to fully enter the planetarium. Its bodies pressed together, stretching, tearing, reforming. A child's face appeared at the center of the shifting flesh and smiled at him. Its teeth weren't teeth at all, but tiny shards of glass glinting with reflected starlight. Larry, the child face sang. Come join us. The distorted clones of himself echoed in unison, join us. Their voices overlapped like broken tape recordings, each slightly out of sync, making his name sound endless. Larry stumbled to the far end of the dome, fumbling for the emergency exit. His fingers clawed at the latch, it was jammed, corroded with some black substance that pulsed under his touch, like flesh. He yanked his hand back, gagging at the stench of rot that clung to his skin. The reflections kept coming. One of them lurched forward, eyeless sockets weeping streams of thick tar. Its hands latched onto Larry's wrist, ice-cold and clammy. Another grabbed his shoulder, its grip too strong, bones snapping beneath its fingers. He screamed then, his voice finally tearing free, raw and ragged. With a burst of desperation, he swung the fire extinguisher again, smashing it into one clone's skull. The head crumpled inward, spraying fragments of bone and dark fluid. But the body didn't fall, it only laughed in his voice, a perfect echo that made his blood freeze. The mass shoved deeper into the room, its many faces pressing against the curved dome of the planetarium. The constellations above flickered, then bent downward, stretching into grotesque shapes. Stars dripped from the ceiling like molten metal, sizzling as they hit the floor. Larry realized with dawning horror, the museum wasn't just alive. It was transforming. The exhibits, the building, even the very air, it was all becoming part of the same monstrous body. History wasn't being displayed anymore. It was consuming the present. The clones lunged at him. He dove beneath their grasping arms and bolted for the staircase that spiraled down to the lower level. His breath came in panicked gasps, vision tunneling, but adrenaline drove him forward. The stairwell walls seemed to close in, narrowing, pulsing like veins. The handrails writhed under his grip, warm and slick like muscle. He let go instantly, stumbling down step after step, his boots splashing into something wet pooling at the bottom. The basement was flooded ankle-deep with a black, viscous fluid that smelled of copper and decay. Every ripple reflected not his face, but screaming strangers, some ancient, some modern, all mouths stretched open in endless wails. He forced himself through the water, each step heavy, sluggish. The air was colder here, and the silence was thick, until it wasn't. The sound came softly at first, a piano. Delicate notes echoing down the corridor, faint, beautiful, almost human. Larry froze. The music grew louder, each note perfectly played, beckoning him closer. He turned a corner and found himself in the museum's music hall. The instruments had been left in their glass cases, violins, flutes, drums. But every one of them was playing on its own, strings vibrating, keys pressing, skins thundering. The air was alive with sound, discordant, wrong, like 100 songs performed at once. At the center sat a grand piano. And on its bench, hunched and rigid, was a figure. Larry's heart lurched. It was his son, Nick. "Dad," Nick whispered, his fingers dancing across the keys in perfect rhythm. His voice cracked with strain. "It won't, let me stop." Larry splashed forward. "Nick. No, 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 this isn't real, this isn't you." Nick's head snapped upward. His eyes were gone, hollow pits dripping black tears down his face. His mouth stretched too wide, his jaw unhinging until it nearly split his head in half. "Play with me, Dad." The music around him erupted, a deafening storm of sound. Violins shrieked like human screams. Drums pounded like collapsing hearts. The piano's notes turned jagged, splintering the air. The flood rose higher, swirling violently, pulling at Larry's legs. Faces broke the surface, teeth snapping, trying to drag him under. He fought, clawing toward the stairs on the far end of the hall, but Nick's distorted figure was already standing, arms stretching unnaturally long, reaching for him. "You can't leave, Dad. History remembers you. Forever." Larry shoved through the water, reaching the staircase just as skeletal hands clawed at his calves. He kicked free and scrambled upward, dripping black fluid, heart thundering so violently it hurt. At the top of the stairs, he collapsed to his knees, gasping. The building groaned around him, the walls warping like living flesh. Somewhere above, the mass shrieked in triumph. And Larry realized the most horrifying truth yet. The museum wasn't just alive. It was awake. Larry staggered through the warped halls, every step heavier than the last. His clothes clung to him, soaked in the black fluid from the music hall. The stench filled his nostrils, metallic and sweet, so strong it made bile rise in his throat. The museum around him was shifting again. Walls that had once been marble now pulsed faintly, veins spiderwebbing across their surface. Paintings twisted in their frames, the faces of historical figures melting, eyes rolling toward him, mouths curling into grins that widened too far. He pressed a hand against the wall to steady himself, but recoiled instantly. It was warm, soft, and it shuddered under his touch like living flesh. Larry whispered to himself, just a dream. It has to be. But he knew better. His dreams never screamed back. A rumble echoed down the corridor. At first he thought it was the mass again, dragging itself closer. But then he realized, it was the building. The museum was breathing. Each groan of stone, each creak of timber was the rasp of lungs inhaling. The floor buckled beneath his feet. He stumbled into the Hall of Dinosaurs, the enormous skeletons looming above him. For a moment, they were still, silent guardians frozen in time. Then the bones twitched. The T-Rex's skull tilted slowly downward, its hollow sockets locking onto him. Vertebrae shifted, claws clicked against each other. One by one, the skeletons reassembled themselves, not into the dinosaurs they once were, but into abominations. Rib cages twisted into cages of teeth. Skulls fused with spines, jaws sprouting from joints. Their movements were jagged, as though their bones resisted the corruption even as it consumed them. Larry backed away, breath trembling. The T-Rex skeleton stepped forward, its bones grinding, marrow dust falling like ash. From its chest cavity, something soft bulged outward, flesh. Rotting, pulsating meat stretched across its ribs, veins weaving like vines. It was becoming more than a skeleton. It was becoming alive. He ran, weaving between displays, but the abominations followed, their twisted bodies scraping the ceiling, jaws gnashing inches above his head. Their footsteps shook the floor, each impact leaving dents in the flesh like marble. A glass display shattered beside him. Wax figures tumbled free, Neanderthals, once harmless. Their wax melted off their bodies like candle wax, revealing muscle beneath. Eyes blinked open in the folds of flesh, mouths splitting where they shouldn't. They dragged themselves forward, hands clawing the air, chanting in low, guttural moans. We are remembered. You are forgotten. Larry swung the fire extinguisher again, bashing one across the head. Its skull cracked, but from the wound spilled not wax, not blood, but parchment. Old, yellowed pages stuffed with words he couldn't read. They fluttered free like moths, each page whispering in a different language. The figure kept coming. The smell of rot and dust closed in around him. The air grew thicker, pressing down on him like wet wool. He ran blind, desperate, until the hall opened into something new, something that shouldn't exist. The museum's grand lobby was gone. In its place stretched a cavernous chamber, its ceiling pulsing like a ribcage. The floor writhed, covered in hands reaching upward, fingers twitching, palms opening and closing like mouths gasping for air. In the center of the chamber stood the mass. It had grown, no longer just a writhing collection of bodies. Now it towered, reaching the ceiling, its limbs stretched into the architecture itself. Its faces were everywhere, on the walls, the ceiling, even the floor beneath him. Some cried, some laughed, some whispered secrets in voices not meant for human ears. Larry fell to his knees. His mind buckled under the sight. He pressed his hands over his ears, shut his eyes tight, but the voices seeped in through bone, through blood. You are part of us. You always were. History swallows everything. He screamed. He clawed at his own face, desperate to drown them out. But a new sound silenced him instantly. His name. Dad. He froze. Slowly, he opened his eyes. Nick stood at the far side of the chamber. His son. Whole. Normal. Smiling. Dad, come here. It's okay. We can go home. Larry's heart lurched. He wanted to believe it. He wanted to believe more than anything. He stumbled toward Nick, tears burning his eyes. But as he got closer, the smile split. Literally. Nick's mouth tore from ear to ear, splitting his face in half. His eyes rolled black, and his skin peeled away like paper, revealing dozens of smaller faces writhing underneath. The figure reached for him with too many arms. Larry staggered back, horror choking him. "You're not my son. You're not Nick." The faces spoke together in Nick's voice. "But I will be. When you forget what he looked like, I'll be all that's left." The chamber shook violently, the mass roaring, its thousands of mouths gnashing. The walls pulsed faster, the hands on the floor clawing upward, trying to drag him under. Larry realized the truth like a knife to the gut. It wasn't just about living history anymore. The museum was erasing reality itself. And it wanted him next. The chamber shook as if the earth itself was convulsing. Larry clung to a broken display stand, but even that pulsed beneath his grip, veins spreading across the wood. The mass loomed higher, stretching into the rafters, its thousand faces merging, splitting, screaming. Everywhere he turned, history itself warped. The knights he had once admired now crawled like insects, armor fused to bone, jaws dangling on chains of tendon. Wax presidents shuffled aimlessly, their wax dripping, revealing rotten flesh and bone beneath. Sacagawea dragged herself along the floor, her eyes replaced with open mouths, each one chanting his name in a rasping chorus. Larry. 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 He backed into a wall, but the wall flexed like a lung. A face bulged outward, his own face, its mouth opening in silent agony. He stumbled away, heart slamming against his ribs. The ground beneath him split. From the fissure rose a new horror, the T-Rex skeleton, now fully transformed. Its bones were wrapped in sinew and muscle, its skull split down the middle, revealing a second face where its brain should be, a child's face, grinning. Its roar shook the chamber, but the sound wasn't a roar anymore. It was laughter, shrill and endless, rattling his teeth. Larry ran, slipping over the slick, pulsing floor. His lungs ached, his vision blurred, but his survival instinct shoved him forward. Every step took him deeper into the labyrinth the museum had become, corridors that bent impossibly, stairs that led to nowhere, doors that opened into screaming mouths. He burst into the hall of ancient civilizations, only it wasn't a hall anymore. It was a pit. The exhibits had fused into a single living organism, a writhing amphitheater of flesh and bone. Roman soldiers hung upside down from strands of tendon, their helmets melted into their skulls. Aztec priests writhed in stone coffins that bled when they moved. Samurai armor had grown into the skin of eyeless warriors, their katanas fused into their arms like blades of bone. And in the pit center stood a throne made of bones. Sitting on it was a figure Larry knew instantly, though he wished he didn't. Akhmenra. The young pharaoh, once noble and kind, was no longer himself. His golden mask had fused into his skull, metal teeth glinting where his lips should have been. His eyes glowed with fire, but inside that fire was hunger, bottomless, eternal. "You shouldn't have come back, Larry Daly," Akhmenra hissed, his voice a chorus of echoes. The tablet was never meant to give life. It was meant to feed. You kept feeding us every night. Larry's throat tightened. No, I didn't. You think history is remembered because it's loved? Akhmenra's laugh was dry, cracking like brittle papyrus. History survives because it devours. And now it devours you. The mass above screamed, its roar shaking the chamber, as though affirming his words. Figures began to crawl out of the pit. Not historical icons. Not wax. Not skeletons. These were people Larry recognized, faces from his own life. His old co-workers. Teachers from school. His neighbors. All twisted, all dead-eyed, their mouths opening in unison. "You've already forgotten us, Larry. Now you'll join us." The sound broke him. He staggered backward, clutching his ears, tears spilling down his face. Nick's voice cut through the chaos. "Dad!" Larry spun, hope flaring. At the pit's edge stood Nick, real, whole, reaching for him. "Dad, hurry. Come with me." Larry lunged forward, every ounce of him desperate to grasp his son's hand. But as their fingers touched, Nick's skin tore away like paper, revealing a nest of writhing worms beneath. His mouth split open, stretching down his chest. The voice that came out wasn't Nick's. "We are your family now." Larry screamed, wrenching himself free. He stumbled, falling onto the fleshy ground, his palms sinking into the pulsing surface. It was like touching raw organs, warm, wet, alive. The floor throbbed beneath him, pulling at his skin, trying to fuse him into itself. He tore himself free and staggered upward, but the faces on the ground stretched open, biting at his ankles. One latched onto his leg, its teeth sinking deep. He beat it with the extinguisher, bone crunching under the impact, but when it let go, his flesh came with it. Blood sprayed, sizzling as it hit the floor, the hands below lapping at it eagerly. Larry collapsed against a column, chest heaving, vision swimming. The museum spoke through every mouth, every wall, every shadow. "There is no leaving. There is no mourning. There is only memory. And memory is flesh." Above him, the ceiling split open, revealing not sky but an endless void filled with screaming faces, stretching into infinity. Larry realized then that he wasn't fighting to survive. He was fighting to avoid becoming part of it. And he was losing. The world had collapsed into screaming. Larry staggered through corridors that no longer resembled the museum he once knew. The walls were alive, sweating, breathing. Faces bulged from their surfaces, some strangers, some people he once loved, all mouthing his name, all begging him to stay. The air stank of blood and wax, of rot and oil, as if every exhibit had melted into a single festering carcass. He knew he couldn't last much longer. His leg throbbed where the faces had torn away chunks of flesh. His breathing was shallow, ragged. But somewhere, deep inside, a thought pulsed, "There has to be a way out." The voice of the museum answered. "There is no out, Larry Daly. Only in. Only deeper. Become history. Become us." The floor split beneath him, veins ripping open like wounds. He fell into blackness, tumbling through the guts of time itself. His body smacked against something hard, yet warm, like stone coated in flesh. When he pushed himself up, he found himself in what looked like an endless gallery. But the displays weren't exhibits. They were people. Each stood frozen behind glass, their eyes wide in silent horror, their mouths stuck mid-scream. Some he recognized, Sacagawea, Teddy Roosevelt, Attila the Hun. But the glass was fogged with condensation, and he realized it wasn't glass at all. It was membrane, thick and wet, pulsing with veins. The cases weren't displays. They were wombs. The people inside weren't wax or replicas. They were alive. And as Larry stared, Sacagawea's hand twitched. Her eyes rolled toward him. Her lips moved. "Help me." He staggered backward, but there was nowhere to go. The cases stretched on forever, each one filled with a different prisoner of time, all pressed against the wet walls, all begging in silence. Their flesh occasionally rippled, like the museum was feeding on them, digesting them slowly while keeping them alive. At the gallery's far end stood the largest case of all. Inside it was, himself. Larry froze. It was him, standing tall, smiling faintly, frozen in the posture of a man who had given up. The other Larry's eyes blinked slowly, as if watching him. Its lips curled upward in a grotesque grin, and the glass membrane trembled. The reflection spoke without moving its mouth. "You've been here all along." "No," Larry whispered, shaking his head. "No, I'm real, I'm still fighting." The other Larry stepped forward inside the case. The membrane split like wet paper, and the figure crawled out. Its flesh sloughed off in ribbons, revealing bone threaded with black veins, but its face, his face, remained intact. The double reached for him. "Join us," it whispered. Larry swung the extinguisher with all the strength left in him. The impact shattered the double's skull, bone shards spraying, but instead of dying, the pieces sprouted mouths that screamed independently. The body collapsed into sludge, writhing like a nest of worms. And from the sludge, more hands emerged. Dozens. Hundreds. They clawed at him, dragging him backward toward the giant pit that had formed at the gallery's center. It wasn't just a pit, it was a maw. A circular mouth lined with teeth, the museum's heart. Faces lined its throat, wailing in eternal agony. Larry struggled, but the hands had already hooked into his flesh, tearing him apart as they pulled him closer. His legs snapped like a twig. His vision blurred with tears and blood. He screamed into the void, "Why me? Why are you doing this to me?" The answer came from everywhere. From the mouths on the floor. From the faces in the walls. From the throat of the pit itself. Because you remembered us. You gave us life. You fed us every night. Now you are ours. You are history. The hands lifted him high above them all. For one brief, terrible moment, Larry saw the infinite void below, the endless spiral of faces screaming through eternity, all swallowed by memory, all trapped forever. And then they dropped him. The teeth closed. Agony beyond words ripped through him as the museum consumed him, piece by piece. His scream joined the chorus, echoing into infinity, until it no longer sounded like him at all. When it was done, the pit closed. The gallery sealed itself. The cases pulsed quietly. Somewhere above, the museum's lights flickered back on. Morning had come. The tourists would arrive soon. And among the exhibits, in a brand new display, stood a figure frozen in time, Larry Daley, smiling faintly, his eyes wide with horror, forever trapped in glass. The plaque below read: Larry Daley, the last night guard. A man who remembered history, until history remembered him. And behind that glass, his eyes blinked.